Welcome to Beat Diabetes. So glad you decided to join us, and we're going to be continuing to look at Jenny Rule's book, Blood Sugar 101. Not because I'm obsessed with this book, but I think it's a great one, and she makes so many good points. I've just got to stick with it at least one more time, if not maybe another. Today we're going to look at the question of at what point are you harming your body with your high glucose levels? We all know that the normal glucose is going to be, at least in American standards, between 85 to 125. 85 when you're not eating and haven't eaten in a couple of hours, and maybe jumping up to 125, 40 minutes to an hour after you eat. That's normal. That's what normal people do. 18-year-old young men and women with lean bodies who exercise and are perfectly healthy, they're never going to see 150 as a glucose level unless they just pig out on Halloween candy, maybe the day after Halloween. But anyway, at what point are you harming yourself? We know that you can go up a lot higher than is normal. You can go up to 150, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. You can have enormously high glucose levels and you're still walking around, you're still living, you're still functioning. You may still go to work with radically high glucose level. But at what point do you start harming yourself? And Jenny Rule answers that question based on some of the studies that she does. Now, she goes through a number of studies. We looked at a couple of them on our last program, and I want to just kind of give you her summation of the level at which you start hurting yourself and hurting your organs in your body. She says the data we've received so far seems to point to the range between 140 and 160 milligrams per deciliter, between 140 and 160 as being where organ damage begins to occur, at least in people who are routinely spending a few hours each day with blood sugars in this range. So that's not all that high. 145, some diabetics are thinking, man, if I can just get to average of 145 milligrams per deciliter, I'd be doing good. And if you're up there at 400 or 500, then yeah, that would be good for you, but you don't want to stay there. So she's saying, based on the studies she's read, that when you jump over 140, specifically 140, and you stay there a few hours. Now, if you just jump up to 140 or 145 and you immediately bounce back down, it's not so bad. But when the problem with diabetes is after you've been diabetic for a while, you not only jump up too high and you have glucose peaks that are out of range, significantly out of range, you stay up too long. So it's not that you just jump up to 175 and then boom, back down you go. You may jump up to 175 and just kind of slowly float downwards. And you may never even be at your baseline level before you have another snack or another meal. And here you go again. And then you slowly float down. So what that means is throughout the day, you're spending hours and hours and hours in what I call the death zone, the zone where you're hurting yourself, hurting your organs. Now, the good news is it's not like you do this for a few months and the next thing you know, they're having a funeral for you. Your body is tough. God made you tough, so you can stand to abuse your body and hurt yourself for some years. And a lot of people have done it for 20 years before they ever know they're diabetic. They've been harming themselves with high glucose levels and staying up in that harming death zone too long. And still they're alive, still they're walking, and they haven't seemed to have suffered too much yet. But you don't want to stay there. And once you get enlightened and realize the harm you're doing, you want to start heading back down. So she says this is probably why the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists currently recommends that people with diabetes try to keep their blood sugars under 140 milligrams per deciliter as much as possible. Now, you may say, well, then I'm doomed, Dennis. I'm done for because I wake up in the morning at 200 milligrams per deciliter and it doesn't get any better. And I go to bed at 250. Well, don't panic and don't give up and don't get too depressed. Where you are is not good, I'm not going to kid you, and you are no doubt doing some damage to your body, but if you can patiently make your way down day by day, meal by meal, and even if it takes 6 months or a year, if you're still alive and you're still fairly functional, there's hope for you. So don't give up. We've had people that have had severe diabetes and they're in their 70s, which means they probably were suffering from way too high glucose levels for a couple of decades. And yet they find the low-carb diet and time-restricted eating. They start applying some of these principles. They start doing some exercise, and next thing you know, over the course of months or maybe even a year or two, they get their way down into the fives club and they're feeling great. And it's like, well, I did it. So sometimes it almost seems like if you can at least smarten up before it gets too bad, you'll be okay. Now, there are others who are experiencing damage before they're ever diagnosed as diabetic. Some people have told me they are suffering neuropathy pains and they're hurting in their legs and their feet, their toes, their hands. They're suffering and they're not even yet fully diabetic. They're not past the 6.5. So it varies from individual and individual as to how much you can take before your body starts to really, really pay the price for high glucose. But if you're going to err on the side of caution. And just be careful and get those glucose levels down. And if you're in that upper 300 range, milligrams per deciliter, just say, well, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to gradually and methodically and wisely make my way back down into the normal range. Now, one other statement she makes, I promised myself I'd try to keep this video a little shorter. I've made some long ones lately. But this one is something near and dear to my heart, and I had to quote it. She says, even the healthy whole grains and low glycemic foods dietitians are so enthusiastic about. And boy, that's it. Healthy whole grains, low glycemic, you're going to be fine. Probably not. She says, even these, the whole grains, the low glycemic foods, may turn out to raise your blood sugar too high. They may work for people who are not diabetic, which includes most dietitians, but, and this is the statement I've never forgotten. I mean, it just hit me hard when I read it. Not that I didn't know it already, essentially, but the way she phrased it and the words she used, they just very powerful. So listen and take note. She says, but my diabetic body doesn't distinguish between oatmeal cereal and chocolate cake. Both have too many carbohydrates and both give me unacceptable blood sugars. My diabetic body can't tell the difference between oatmeal and chocolate cake. I found that out myself. And I've done all kinds of tests and I've compared things like grape juice with soda. Found out grape juice raises your blood sugar higher than soda does. I've made a contrast between candy bars and bananas and demonstrated that bananas will raise your blood sugar higher than some candy bars. So she says, my diabetic can't tell the difference. And it's true. If you're diabetic, it wouldn't even have to be your diabetic body, it could be your pre-diabetic body or your almost pre-diabetic body, can hardly tell the difference between quinoa and Little Debbie snack cakes, between oatmeal and a big supersized Coca-Cola. You just can't hardly tell the difference. Now, I could do test after test after test and demonstrate this again and again, and I have done a number of them. But I'm not going to do too many because I don't want to damage my body. And I don't want to hurt myself too much. I've done it enough. You can look it up. And one of these days, I'm going to put together a series of videos of some of these contrasts I've made and show that your body just can't hardly tell the difference. And I was thinking about this, and I came up with this illustration. You know, I'm a preacher, and I love to use illustrations. That's how we preachers, that's how we do things. That's how we communicate spiritual truths, and that's how I'm going to communicate a physical truth about diabetes. Let's say I was sentenced to death for some imaginary crime. But in this little kingdom where I happen to live, they shoot you with arrows to kill you. So they don't use the gas chamber, they don't hang you, they shoot you with arrows. But they give you a choice. So I am scheduled to die at noon today. But in the morning they come to me and they say, Dennis, we're sorry, we're going to have to put you to death for this crime you've committed. And we're going to shoot you with arrows until you die. But we're going to give you a choice. Would you like to be killed with nice arrows, brand new with shiny, gleaming points on them? Or would you rather be killed with rusty arrows that are old and they look terrible, they're coated with rust? Which kind of arrows would you like to be shot through and killed with? What would I say? I'd say, who cares? It doesn't matter, I'm going to die either way. Who cares whether I get shot with an arrow with a shiny, gleaming point, or I get killed with an old rusty arrow that's been around for decades? It doesn't matter. I'm going to die either way. So what is the point, Dennis? Who cares if I'm going to drive my blood sugar crazy and destroy my health with quinoa and sweet potatoes and brown rice, or whether I do it with white rice and white potatoes, or whether I do it with Little Debbie snack cakes and moon pies and Snicker bars and potato chips? Who cares? You're destroying your body either way, or any such way. Carbohydrates is the name of the game, and it's what you've got to deal with, along with employing time-restricted eating and some exercise if you really want to see victory. So the people that push quinoa and brown rice and Ezekiel bread and so forth, we've demonstrated it again and again. Your body hardly knows the difference between those kind of foods and soda and candy and chocolate cake. So be wise, my friend, and reduce those carbohydrates, employ time-restricted eating, and get out of the death zone where you're spending hours every day at 140, 160, 180, 200 milligrams per deciliter. Get out of that zone and start spending your days under 140, ideally under 120. And when you've really nailed this thing down, you're going to be floating around 100 to 110 most of the day. You're going to wake up below 100. Get out of that death zone and do yourself a huge favor.
My daughter Joy has recently started a YouTube channel, and one of her early programs was an interview of yours truly. Joy wanted me to share how I transformed from full-time preaching to devoting so much of my time and energy to beating diabetes. Now, I've shared some of the details of this on Beat Diabetes, but there are some other things you'll probably never hear if you don't see this two-part interview on Joy's channel. I'll leave a link to Joy's YouTube channel in the description that will take you to those videos where she interviewed me. And you just might want to watch some of her own videos and subscribe to her channel. In a short time, she's becoming a great YouTuber, if I do say so myself.